rights covers all aspects of life. In our part of the world, we take these rights for granted. If we are hungry, we eat. When we are thirsty, we drink. Our children have schools to go to. Tonight, we are gathered here, free to talk about whatever we want, to share our opinions and ideas. We take it for granted. It is not before one of these rights is taken away from us that we actually realize how vitally important each and every article is. Now, in Stein Inge Johannessen's case, it was his right to be presumed innocent that were taken away from him. Now, Christian, thank you for being here tonight. I've taken the liberty to tell your father's story in a human rights perspective. It was a direction your father inspired me to pursue. Now, I would like to try to tell you why he was arrested for murder, how he fought his way back to life, and eventually became a teacher of human rights. Your father's lectures made a profound impression on the audience. He inspired thousands of police officers to reflect upon the powers that we are given and how that power should be managed and can be managed with the human dignity as a foundation. My short version of your father's story starts with the murder in Oslo in 1999. It was a difficult case for the police. It is expected that the police solve the murder cases. But in this case, 1 year went by with no progress. It creates pressure on the detectives and an working environment that increases the chance for human error. But then, suddenly, a witness turns up and telling us that not only did she know the murderer, she knew his name, she knew who it was. It was Stein Inge. And the detectives believed her. In fact, they wanted to believe her. Without her statement, the investigation would go back where it started 1 year ago with nothing. It is a psychologically almost unbearable thought, and particularly so when believing her is such an attractive one. I can still remember my colleagues' enthusiasm that day. And it didn't take long before Stein Inge found himself arrested and charged with murder. Now, Stein Inge, he believed that the police would release him quite quickly. He trusted the police, so he accepted a short period in custody. But 1 week followed the next, and weeks became months. And after 6 months in total isolation, Stein Inge started to lose faith, not only in the system that kept him locked up, but in life itself. He became suicidal. Stein Inge didn't take his life. Instead, he called his lawyer and said he wanted to confess. At this point, Stein Inge actually woke up at nights in the cell, dreaming, having nightmares that he was the murderer. Fortunately, his lawyer talked him out of it. Finally, the court released Stein Inge But the charges against him were upheld. And after carefully reviewing the case, the Attorney General decided to bring it to court. 4 days before the trial started, a man walked into a hotel in Oslo and lit a small fire in the lobby. It was a trivial act, but not for him. He had a purpose. At the police station, the arrested man told the police that he had read about the upcoming trial in the newspapers. And he told the police that they had to stop the trial. It was him, and him alone, that had committed the murder. Now, for the detectives, it was hard to believe, but it eventually became clear that he was responsible. The man's confession came as a shock, not only to the police, but the whole justice system. I was asked to assist, and one of the first things I did was to interview Stein Inge. And before we continue, I would like to share with you what I remember the most from that interview. It's just a short clip.
Det har vært 3 tøffe år. Det har det. Så jeg håper I hvert fall at alle parter kan dra lærdom av hvordan man ikke skal gjøre det.
Now, Stein Inge's humble plead made a profound impression on me. I knew the detectives involved. I knew that it had nothing to do with corruption or evil will. So I asked my organization for a scholarship to do a PhD, to try to find out what goes wrong when it does go wrong with the police investigations. And more importantly, what can we do to prevent it from happening? Before we continue your father's story, I would just like to take a short, brief look into what science has taught us. Firstly, scientists looking into the causes of wrongful convictions find it useful to divide between immediate causes and the more underlying causes. Eyewitness identification parades is a vulnerable procedure because small things, almost invisible things, can actually have a profound impact on the outcome. This picture is taken from a violent rape case in Oslo, Norway, 2002, in which the victim identified the innocent suspect, and he was convicted for rape. He was a family man, 2 children, no prior police record. Can you imagine being convicted for rape? What are you going to tell your children? What are you going to tell your wife? Now, the detectives did nothing wrong according to the guidelines, but they were written in 1933. New knowledge has produced, research has produced new knowledge, urging the police to change their procedures. And finally, last year, we were able to issue new ones, based on science. Can you see who the can you see who the innocent is? The innocent suspect? I can almost picture myself, I can hear the detective in charge instructing them. Arms down. And everybody would listen. Except one person. He was too nervous to follow instructions. And suddenly he stands out. Small things. Another immediate cause that the police can actually reduce by listening to what the scientists say and by changing our methods from old interrogation methods to new research-based investigative interviewing techniques is the problem with false confessions. Now, Stein Inge, he started to lose faith in his own memory. Fritz Moen spent 18.5 years in prison, innocent, based on his false confession. False confessions is not a Nordic problem. In the United States, the Innocent Project has helped 317 innocent people out of jail. And in almost 1/4 of those cases, the innocent person confessed. Now, false confessions happens all over the world, and particularly so in areas of the world where the criminal justice system relies heavily on confessions. Sture Bergwall, or Thomas Quick, he was convicted for 7 separate murders based on his false confessions alone. Now, let's move on to the more underlying causes. You remember the witness that told the police that Stein Inge was the murderer. This is a photocopy of an internal email exchange between the detectives, written the very same day that she gave her first statement. And as you can see, my colleagues, the police, concluded way too early. As pointed out by the British philosopher Francis Bacon in the 16th century, the first conclusion colors and brings into conformity with itself all that comes after. From the moment we form an opinion, our unconscious mind starts searching for evidence, for information that confirms our view of the world. The most scary function of confirmation bias, or tunnel vision if you like, is that the human mind has a tendency to explain away, or in the worst case, ignore information that points in another direction. When scientists look into the causes of wrongful convictions, they find that the problems associated with confirmation bias, or tunnel vision, is the underlying cause in almost every case they study, including Stein Inge's. So we have to teach our detectives to think differently. We have to provide them with knowledge and methodology that stimulates them to generate alternative hypotheses and actively test them, not pursuing information confirming their belief of guilt. From the moment we form an opinion, we are no longer impartial. But by generating alternative hypotheses and testing them, we can actually operationalize the presumption of innocence. Now, moving back to your father's case. Upon his release, Stein Inge eventually managed to overcome his drug addiction. And when he did, he contacted the police and asked for a meeting. He had tried to hate us, he said, but he couldn't. Because Stein Inge always felt that the interviewing officer had treated him with respect and dignity. I knew Stein Inge wanted us to learn from his case, so I suggested that we team up and prepare a lecture to talk about what happened. The detective in charge was, and still is, one of my best friends. He was brave enough to step out and place himself in the limelight of failure, talking about his biggest mistake in his professional career. Now that takes courage, and courage is what we need to change our system. We were originally invited to the National Police Academy to talk about the case for the students. This picture is taken from one of our police academies. But what I noticed was that the teachers at the academy, they kept coming up and watching us year after year, even though they had seen us and heard the story many times before. And when I asked them why, they told me that listening to Stein Inge made them and reminded them of why they joined the police in the first place. It was great to travel with your father. The stories he told made a profound impression on us, but he also made us laugh. And I think that his sense of humor helped him cope in life with all the troubles that he had experienced. But eventually, the burdens, including the one that the state had placed on him, surfaced, and it became too much. So he decided to end his life. Now, he had become a friend of mine, and it hurts to think about. But my pain is nothing compared to yours. I respect his decision. I continue to teach in Tromsø, Bodø, Tokyo, Jakarta, far north, far east, it doesn't matter. Human rights are universal. And so are the values that Stein Inge reminded us of. Here I am in Hanoi with the Norwegian Center for Human Rights, talking about investigative interviewing with the presumption of innocence. I always start my lectures by talking about your father, what he experienced and what he taught us. Now, although he's not there, I still feel that his spirit is. So, Christian, thank you very much for allowing me to show pictures and tell stories of your father in very troubled circumstances. He was very proud of you. I know. He told me many times. I miss him too. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.